What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 13 top 36 running back rankings. No buys this week, so it does feel like pretty much every position is in a pretty good spot. I do want to give you guys a warning. Typically, I do positional rankings for running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, defenses, and then also flex rankings. Going out of town this week, so I'm only going to have the running backs and wide receivers this week, but I will answer your questions in the comments. So if you want to ask me questions about quarterbacks, tight ends, could be flex questions, I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can, but did want to throw that out there at the top. Looking at the running backs, though, starting off in Tier 1, these are your studs. They're locks in your lineup. Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, CMC, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson, and then Derrick Henry gets in this tier this week. Great matchup against the Bengals, who are allowing the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Then looking at Tier 2, starting it off with James Cook. It's actually not a great matchup. Steelers, bottom 6 in points per game allowed to the running back position. James Cook has been super steady. He's on a good offense. And has just been like one of the best running backs in the league this season. Also a little bit more involved as a pass catcher over the last few weeks. Then I've got Josh Jacobs. I am expecting him to return this week. Kind of seemed like initially he could miss at least a few weeks with his knee injury, but it actually seemed like he was somewhat close to playing in week 12. This is another tough matchup, like the fewest points per game allowed to the running back position. I just trust Josh Jacobs. They really run this offense through him. The volume's going to be there, and he will have a decent amount of touchdown upside. Then I've got Travis Etienne going up against the Titans. And what a difference a week makes for Travis Etienne, week 11 to week 12. In week 11, it looks like he might be losing his starting spot at the very least, like entering a really strong committee with Bashal Tutin. Tutin out-carried him before the Tutin injury, and Tutin looked great, right? Super efficient on the ground, was getting in on the goal line. Then Tutin suffers that ankle injury. He's limited in practice all week, and Travis Etienne comes out in week 12 and just dominates the usage. 70% opportunity share, 15 carries for 86 yards, 3 receptions for 40 yards. So not only did he get the opportunities, but he came in, he was super productive. Now he draws a great matchup against the Titans, who are top 6 in points per game allowed to the running back position. So just a great swing here if you do roster Travis Etienne. My RB10 this week is going to be Travion Henderson going up against the Giants. And I was pretty high on Henderson heading into this past week, but I didn't expect him to get the usage that he did in this game. Maybe like the touches, but the overall split in this backfield was pretty surprising. He had a 71% opportunity share. That's not committee situation. That's more on the workhorse scale than it is a committee back. Now, it wasn't super efficient, didn't get into the end zone, only 11.1 PPR points, which is not great, but he draws a great matchup this week again against the Giants. They're allowing the second most points per game to the running back position. I'll talk about Ramondre later, but he did not have a large role in this game. I was someone who has been very in on Henderson. I loved him as a prospect. I really liked him as a redraft pick. And so the Ramondre stuff, the lack of Henderson early on in the season was super frustrating. And I guess I had some PTSD from that because I was fully expecting a pretty significant Ramondre workload. Not that he was going to be the clear-cut RB1, but I was expecting a somewhat competitive split. We still got some gross Ramondre usage where Henderson gets them down to the goal line and they run 6 or 7 plays and they can't get in, and you've got Ramondre, you've got Terrell Jennings working in on the goal line, and none of them can get in. So there's going to be frustrating moments like that, but I believe in the player. It's a great matchup here for Henderson. And then the final player in this tier 2 area, it's going to be Chase Brown going up against the Ravens. Joe Burrow looks like he's going to be back, so that is awesome for Chase Brown. And he's kind of entering what you expected him to be doing this season, right? Because coming into the year, it was you don't know if he's the most talented running back, but he's in this great spot where the defense is terrible, the offense is going to put up a ton of points, he's going to be the workhorse in his backfield, and it was not looking pretty early on, right? He had some really rough games to start off the season. Burrow goes down, the offense just completely craters, and so now it's bad offensive line. Is he an elite talent? Probably not. And the production was brutal, but he started to pick it up as of late, last 5 games, 8.1 PPR points per game, 6 yards per carry. Now with Burrow back, like things are looking up for Chase Brown here. Not the greatest matchup against the Ravens. This defense has gotten healthy. They're looking good, but Chase Brown's still a strong running back one play in my opinion. Now moving into tier 3, this tier also feels very strong. Like I initially was considering having like 2 and 3 just combined. I did end up splitting it up. I'm starting off this tier with Kyren Williams going up against the Panthers. Really rough week 12. Like if you would have told me the Rams completely blew out the Bucks, scored 30 plus points, I would have thought Kyren would have had a really strong game. He did not, 5.8 PPR points, but he had been solid before that, 16 plus PPR points in the previous 3. He's just in this spot where like he's not the full-on workhorse. You're still going to get a decent amount of Blake Corum. They're kind of, swapping drives. And then the touchdowns are kind of taking a hit because like Devontae Adams is pretty much like their goal line back. Like the dude is just an absolute monster in the red zone in terms of getting into the end zone. So that's kind of hurting Kyren. It's a fine matchup against the Panthers. Game script wise, it should be solid. I think he's a fine like fringe RB1 option. Then I've got Bucky Irving, who seems like he is going to make his return this week. There were like some sketchy reports about like him potentially just missing a ton of time moving forward. Good to know that wasn't true. Seems like he didn't handle the injuries super well mentally, but they're planning on him being back this week. So good to see for fantasy, good to see from a real life perspective for Bucky Irving. But he draws a pretty soft matchup here against the Cardinals. They are 8th in points per game allowed to the running back position. We'll see on the status of Baker Mayfield, but I do think this is a game where the Bucs are going to be able to run the ball. I have not forgotten how good Bucky Irving is. This dude is so talented. He's a fun runner. He's a great pass catcher. And so is he going to step in and have like a monster workload right away? Maybe not, which is why I don't have him as like a running back one this week, but someone who I would not hesitate to throw into my lineup if you drafted him. After Bucky, I've got Saquon Barkley going up against the Bears, and it's kind of just brutal watching Saquon, also just watching this Eagles offense. I did a video in the offseason where I was talking about like who should be drafted as the running back one. So I was comparing Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, and Saquon Barkley, and I believe I listed Saquon as my running back 3 out of that group. And my overall argument was like, I think these guys are all going to be strong picks. The big concern, though, was just how many touches Saquon had last year. And then the fact that a lot of guys like fall off in the, the next season. And yeah, I had him running back 3, but like I still didn't think it would be this sort of like dramatic tanking of his production, his efficiency, 2.8 yards per carry in his last 3 games. It felt like last year he was ripping off a huge touchdown run every single week. Like you could just pencil in 30 plus yard breakaway play. That's not happening this season. It's a fine matchup against the Bears, like game script wise. He should be decent. He's still someone who's like very startable, giving you like running back 2 production, but it's just been a massive bummer for Saquon Barkley this season. After Saquon, I've got Ashton Genty going up against the Chargers. He is dealing with an ankle injury. There's no guarantee he plays this week, but like I'm not going to be starting Raheem Mostert. So if Genty's out, just like scratch him off the rankings, and I wouldn't be playing, his backup, anyone else in that backfield. He's been very productive in his last 4 games, 19, 15.3, 9.4, 24.8 PPR points. The receiving has been there, at least 5 targets in each of his last 4. So I like the usage. It's good that they're feeding him. Hopefully he's healthy and good to go this week. Then I've got Rico Dowdle going up against the Rams. This feels low because Rico's just been an absolute stud, but it is a tough matchup against the Rams. They are 3rd lowest in points per game allowed to the running back position. This Panthers offense is just like so volatile. They'll go out, have a monster game, and then they'll come back the next week and just look completely incompetent. And then we did see more Chuba Hubbard than we'd seen in the past, at least in terms of the split. Like Rico Dowdle, 10 opportunities to Chuba 7. So that's not great. I still think Rico is a very strong running back too, but it kind of seems like his Linsanity run of being like a high-end running back 1 has probably come to an end. At running back 17, I've got Javonte Williams going up against the Chiefs. He's been fine. This is something I've been talking about. His like rushing stats have been solid, but in his last 3 games, 7.3, 10.3, 12.1 PPR points, he's just not getting involved as a pass catcher, and it's just nuking any upside he has. And if he's not getting into the end zone, the numbers just aren't going to be great. So he has 6 total targets in his last 5 games. That's not going to cut it. And then he's got a tough matchup. Chiefs, 5th lowest points per game allowed to the running back position. And then my final player in this tier, Breece Hall, going up against the Falcons. The usage has been there, at least 16 opportunities in his last 4 games. And then the Falcons defense, they've been a really strong matchup for opposing running backs, 4th in points per game allowed. So I like this spot here for Breece, a nice mid-tier running back to play. Now pivoting into tier 4, I'm going to start it off with RJ Harvey going up against the Commanders. We saw him get his first opportunity as the starter in week 11. He had 11 carries, 3 targets, didn't do anything crazy with those touches, but remember that was a super close, super competitive game with the Chiefs. I think we could see him have an expanded role here against the Commanders. First off, he's coming out of the bye week. This game probably not going to be as tight, as competitive. And then the Commanders are allowing the 5th most points per game to the running back position. So a great spot here for Harvey to really kind of catapult himself rest of season. At running back 20, I've got Kamani Vidal going up against the Raiders. It's possible, I guess, that Marion Hampton returns this week. I wouldn't bank on it. I'd expect him back within the next few weeks. But Kamani Vidal has had 6 games as the clear-cut running back 1. He scored at least 17 points in 3 of those games, and then he has scored under 8 in the other 3. So he's been very boom or bust. I think this is a pretty decent matchup here against the Raiders where he could have one of those boom games. Then someone who's kind of been disappointing, Jaylen Warren going up against the Bills. We were in a spot a few weeks ago where it looked like Jaylen Warren was going to run away with his backfield. He was operating like a workhorse, strong usage on the ground. He was getting a lot of pass catching opportunities, and he is really just bleeding routes to Kenneth Gainwell. In his last 4 games, he's only been targeted 6 total times. And you look at this matchup and you're like, this should be a great spot here against the Bills. They're allowing the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. But now you're looking at a dude who's in a pretty heavy split with Kenneth Gainwell. And unfortunately for Warren, Gainwell's kind of making the most of his opportunities this week. He was super productive on the ground. In the previous week, he had that monster receiving day. I think he had 70 plus yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. And so even in a great matchup, I think it's tough to have Warren ranked any higher than a back end running back 2, especially on an offense that's just, not all that exciting, not a super high ceiling unit. Continuing on with this tier, I've got Kenneth Walker going up against the Vikings, and it seems like maybe Kenneth Walker starting to pull away in this backfield. He took 15 of the 21 running back opportunities. I'm not fully on board. I think the Seahawks could just do the bait and switch on us, and all of a sudden Zach Charbonnet 50-50 stays getting the red zone in week 13. But in this game, he doubled Charbonnet's snaps and routes, blew him out of the water in touches. Unsurprisingly, Zach Charbonnet was still the guy who got into the end zone, but hopefully Kenneth Walker is turning the corner here. A couple more guys in this tier, actually 2 rookies. First is Quinshawn Judkins going up against the 49ers. Week 12 gets into the end zone twice. That was his fantasy day right there. The issue is the efficiency is bad. This is not a good offense. And then he just has no receiving upside. So it's kind of fortunate he scored 2 touchdowns, right? It's good, I guess, that they're using him wildcat when they get into the goal line or near the goal line. That is fun. That's good for his touchdown upside. But this team has implied 17 points this week. They're 6.5 point dogs. And so I just think in a lot of these matchups, the game script is just not going to be favorable for Quinshawn Judkins. And then the last guy in this tier, Woody Marks, going up against the Colts. In his last 3 games, the usage has been great. 17 plus opportunities in all of those, but he's only averaging 10 PPR points per game. And then somewhat surprisingly, actually very surprisingly, the receiving usage is just not there. 5 targets in his last 3 games coming into the NFL. It was Woody Marks, probably not going to be a, between the tackles runner, not going to be an early down guy. He's going to be a receiving specialist, a 3rd down dude, and all of a sudden he's handling a huge workload, but it's all on the ground. Seems somewhat suboptimal. I'm not going to complain about all the opportunities, but hopefully he can actually, log some strong fantasy days with that usage. Now moving into tier 5, these are your early to mid-tier running back 3s. I'm starting it off with Trey Benson. Hopefully he can make his return from his knee injury. If he can, it's a solid matchup against the Bucs, who are 10th in points per game allowed to the running back position. This Cardinals running back room has just kind of been a mess, right? It's like a revolving door of Bam Knight, Michael Carter, Amari DiMercado. I think if Benson's healthy, he should be the clear-cut running back one. There's just points to be had on this Cardinals offense. They're getting into these trailing game scripts. They go super pass heavy. Trey Benson could be a decent pass catcher in this backfield. We've got Devin Neal going up against the Dolphins. Alvin Kamara likely going to miss some time with his knee injury. It's a good matchup against the Dolphins, top 10 in points per game allowed to the running back position. And then Devin Neal came in, logged a solid receiving day. He was the only other running back to log an opportunity in this game outside of Alvin Kamara. Now, the Taysom Hill usage is pretty gross. I'm not sold that Devin Neal is some sort of like elite talent, but you came into the year with Kamara as the running back one. He's now out of the mix. You had Kendre Miller as the running back two. He was getting involved early on. He's done for the year. So you're kind of just left with Devin Neal, and hopefully he can get some of the goal line carries, and Taysom Hill, stops getting stuffed and killing all their drives. But even if he doesn't get those opportunities, I think the usage is going to be fine, can catch passes. He's just like an overall solid, well-rounded running back. I don't think he's amazing anywhere, but this kind of was the upside to him as a prospect, where it's like if he does get a handcuff role and he becomes the guy, he could just handle a decent workload and give you fine production. Continuing on with this tier, Aaron Jones going up against the Seahawks. Just a brutal matchup here. I talked about the Titans last week. They might have been implied 13.5 points now that I'm thinking about it, but Vikings all the way down at 15.5 implied points. That is a brutally low number. On the bright side, Aaron Jones does look like the clear running back one over Jordan Mason, but it's just like, what are you actually going to get out of this offense? JJ McCarthy has been unbelievably bad. And then he might not even play this week with a concussion. So it might be Brosmer. I know some people are hyped about him. I think it's very likely that he's not going to be great either. And so maybe he gets some receiving usage. That would be cool. Just a tough spot here with Aaron Jones. After Jones, I've got Tyrone Tracy Jr. going up against the Patriots. Really nice week 12. I mean, Jameis Winston is just like fantasy gold for everyone around him. Tracy had 24 opportunities, to Singletary's 14, had 130 yards from scrimmage, definitely more productive through the air. It is a bad matchup here against the Patriots. Second fewest points per game allowed to the running back position, but it also could be a more favorable game script, trailing to a very strong Patriots team. We're going to see more receiving usage from Tracy. Running back 29, I've got DeAndre Swift going up against the Eagles, and definitely a backfield to monitor here. Kyle Monangai just straight up had the better usage in the Week 12 matchup. Swift had 9 opportunities to Monangai's 12. The reason why I still have DeAndre Swift ahead, and actually a tier ahead of Monangai, is I just think game script wise, the Bears are 7-point dogs against the Eagles. I think there's going to be more pass catching usage to the running backs, and I think that will benefit DeAndre Swift in this specific matchup. Running back 30, Kareem Hunt going up against the Cowboys. This might seem low, and honestly, looking at it, it might be low. Maybe he should be higher in this tier 5 area. I will say that if Isaiah Pacheco does not play, then you can shoot Kareem Hunt, honestly, into the tier 4 area. He'd be in there with Warren Walker, guys like that. The issue for Hunt, though, is that Isaiah Pacheco, I believe, was a full participant late in the week 12. So I expect him to be back. And early on in the season, this was just a really gross committee. I think Kareem Hunt has kind of earned the opportunity to be the number one, but I still think Pacheco is going to be involved. This is not a super efficient backfield, but Hunt's been solid, 12-plus PPR points in his last 4, and then Cowboys allowing the 6th most points per game to the running back position. And then my final tier 5 running back, Kenneth Gainwell, going up against the Bills. Mentioned him with Jaylen Warren. In Gainwell's last 2 games, he has carried the ball 19 times. He has been targeted 14 times. He has 47.7 PPR points. And then the Bills are giving up the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. And then the 6th and final tier, Zach Charbonnet going up against the Vikings. Like I talked about, usage was not great. Only 6 carries, still got into the end zone. Also not a great matchup against the Vikings. Kyle Monangai led the Bears in snaps, routes, carries, obviously at the running back position. 12 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. Also took 2 of the 3 goal line carries. Then we've got Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Giants. Talked about it, thought he'd have a better role. He did not. 8 of 31 running back opportunities. On those 8 opportunities, he turned it into 10 total yards. He did take 4 of the 11 goal line snaps, so like some touchdown upside. Giants, great matchup, but not someone who I'm excited to play. Chris Rodriguez going up against the Broncos. This might seem low for like someone who the last time we saw him, 15 carries, 79 yards. It's just such a bad role in this Commanders offense where there's no receiving upside, there's not a lot of touchdown upside, and then it's a bad matchup against the Broncos and Commanders, 6.5-point dogs. And then my final guy here, definitely slip in. David Montgomery going up against the Packers. He has scored 11 or fewer PPR points in his last 6 games. In his last 2, he has had 7 and 8 total opportunities. And this is coming off a week where Dan Campbell said they needed to get him the ball more, get him more carries. That did not happen, and for good reason, right? Jahmyr Gibbs is insane. Arguably the best running back in the NFL. I think, you could certainly make a very strong case for Jonathan Taylor. If it's not Jahmyr Gibbs at running back 1, I think he's probably the running back 2. And so it's like, why are we going to have this super heavy split with Gibbs and Montgomery? And that's not even to say Montgomery's bad. Like, he can be a totally fine, serviceable running back, but you just got to give more opportunities to Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions have certainly kind of caught on to that. And David Montgomery, just not a super strong fantasy option at this point in the season, and also not a good matchup against the Packers. So that is going to wrap it up for my top 36. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. If you have other positional questions, I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.